Cystic fibrosis. My name is Taylor Bonamicher, and I chose to do my research project on cystic fibrosis. I decided to choose this topic because it automatically stuck out to me. I was not really familiar with the topic. I knew it had something to do with the lungs and something to do with breathing, but I really had no idea what it was. I later found out that it is inherited and not contagious. Prior to choosing this topic, I did some research to see more in depth what cystic fibrosis really was. First, we will talk about the basics of cystic fibrosis. So, what is it? CF, which is the abbreviation for cystic fibrosis, affects many parts of the human body. Many hear the term cystic fibrosis and they're automatically thinking about the lungs. In some cases, this is correct, but many internal organs, including the stomach, are infected by the vicious disease. The disease affects the mucous membranes of the lungs and the stomach, for example. Healthy subjects have very thin, slimy, and slippery mucus that is very easy to coat the organs. For infected subjects, on the other hand, mucus is thick and sticky, causing blockage of passageways and ducts internally. To the right is a picture of a set of lungs. These lungs are healthy, but in the next slide, there's a zoomed-in set where the lungs are infected with cystic fibrosis. Symptoms. Key symptoms with the disease are as follows. You can have salty tasting skin, coughing, lung infection where you're always in the hospital or always at the doctor, wheezing, infertility sometimes in males, poor growth, and bowel movement difficulties. If we look to the right here, we can see a picture of a cross section, which is the cutting of an object into slices to make it more easily visible, of a healthy airway, and then an airway that is infected with cystic fibrosis. If we look at the healthy airway, it shows a thin layer of mucus coating the wall of the airway. If we look at the other airway that is infected by cystic fibrosis, we can see a thick, dark layer of mucus trapping the flow in the airway. Now, if we look directly under each airway here, we can see the CFTR channel. This is where chloride ions are transported across epithelial membranes. We can see that in the healthy CFTR channel pictured here, this is where the chloride ions are easily passing through into and out of the cell. And then on the other hand is the mutant CFTR channel, and it has a buildup of thick mucus, not allowing the chloride ions to be transported in and out of the cell. You can see it here, it's the green thick stuff over the chloride ion transport chain, which is the CFTR channel. Here is just an image of a set of lungs. They look healthy from when you're looking right here, but if we cut lengthwise, it's a transverse section, and this is the healthy set of the trachealis muscles, and this is the one affected with cystic fibrosis. The transverse section shows the healthy trachealis muscle versus the thickened, inflamed muscle, and we can once again see a visual image of the increased production of thick mucus. You can see it here, and then if we're looking at the cystic fibrosis lumen, it's much narrower, which is harder to breathe for the person who is infected. Where does cystic fibrosis occur? Cystic fibrosis can affect many parts of your body, but it mainly affects the secretory glands that are in the major internal organs. These glands are very important for secretions and discharge, and if we cannot produce this, it leads to many problems in our bodies, blockages and clogs of all of our organs. CF is a mutation that is seen on the CFTR gene that is on chromosome 7. So here we can look at the picture and we see the pink chromosome and the blue. The pink represents mom, blue represents dad. These chromosomes are chromosome 7, and they have an allele here, and there's a mutation on one of these genes or both of these genes. We can see that the picture on the right shows that the child inherits one of each of these from each parent. On the chromosomes, there is a CFTR gene that will later create the CFTR channel. And then if we look here, we can see the CFTR channel. So this gene will end up having a mutation that causes cystic fibrosis. Most of the people that are affected by the mutation are Caucasians. All races are affected, but Caucasians are the most popular, and they're usually Caucasians that are native to Northern Europe. How is cystic fibrosis inherited? Both parents, mother and father, have to be carriers of the CFTR gene. This means that the mutation will be present before the parents come together to bear children. Once the child is born, it really only takes approximately 6 to 8 months for symptoms to start to appear, which we went over that. It can be salty tasting skin, wheezing, coughing. But the most popular first symptoms that you will see is wheezing and persistent cough and lung infection. And it only takes about 1 year for it to be completely and correctly diagnosed. Specialists usually have the diagnosis by age 1. And here's an image that shows the mother and the father both being carriers of the mutant CFTR gene, which is dark blue. And then they both have a normal CFTR gene, meaning that they are carrying this. They don't have cystic fibrosis. They're just carrying the mutant gene. The normal one overrides the faulty. So the children can be seen here, and they can be carriers, they can have the disease, or they can just not have anything at all. Let's look at the first son. Here he is right here. This child inherited 2 copies, one from mom and one from dad, of the normal CFTR gene. Therefore, the child does not carry CFTR mutations, or he does not even have the gene at all, mutant gene. Now to the right of him is a daughter. She is classified as a carrier because she inherited 1 normal gene and 1 mutated gene, just like the parent. Next is the second boy, having the same inheritance outcome as the daughter. He inherited a normal and a mutated gene, so therefore he is a carrier of cystic fibrosis. And lastly is the last daughter who received 2 copies of the mutated gene. Therefore, she has cystic fibrosis. From this, we can see that the dominant allele is the normal CFTR gene, and the recessive allele is the mutated CFTR gene. A dominant allele will always override the recessive allele. So, for example, for the first daughter, she had 1 normal and 1 mutated gene. The normal gene is dominant, and it overrides the recessive gene, which is the faulty CFTR gene or the mutated gene. Gregor Mendel. Gregor Mendel is the reason why we even know half of the information that we do about inheritance. Let's first start off by understanding this image. Here is a Punnett square. Punnett squares predict the genotype of a cross between 2 subjects. In this case, we're looking at a male and female pea plant. The pea plants here are represented by the male and female signs. We can see the female is here, and then the male is up here. Capital letters in the Punnett squares, here we have a capital B and a capital B. These represent a dominant allele, and a lowercase letter represents a recessive allele. So little b is recessive. With this being said, Gregor Mendel, the man who performed the test on garden peas, is classified as the father of genetics. Mendel's experiment shows that for every 3 purple flowers, 1 white flower was produced. So we can see here that these capital letters and lowercase letters are affecting the appearance or the phenotype of the flowers. Genotype is the word that you use for like the letters here, which like houses the genes, and then the phenotype is the genes causing like the color, the appearance. It can be smooth, rough, purple, white, etc. Next, we have the inheritance of traits. Cystic fibrosis only affects homozygous recessive individuals. This means that the genotype, or the letters that you see here, have to be both lowercase and the same letter. This just represents that both lowercase letters are recessive alleles. On the contrary, the carriers of cystic fibrosis are heterozygous individuals. This means that the genotype is a capital letter and a lowercase letter. Let's look at the image to the right. The first set of these chromosomes is homozygous. We can see a capital B here and a capital B here. This means that both of these alleles are dominant and they're the same, so they're homozygous. So capital B is a homozygous dominant allele. Next, we're going to look at the heterozygous. We have a capital B and a little b. They're opposite, so they're called heterozygous. And here we can see the alleles, a capital V, a little b, a little b, and a capital B. So they're put together. And the capital B is dominant, the little b is recessive, so the capital B overrides. So whatever trait that this capital B has, let's say this is the purple flowers, and the little b is the white flowers, this will be purple and this will be purple because it's overridden by the capital B. Lastly, we have the homozygous recessive alleles, and they're represented by two lowercase letters, so little b, little b. Since there's no dominant allele here, the homozygous recessive individual will only contract the recessive alleles. So since this can be a white flower and a white flower, the flower will be white because no dominant allele is overriding it. Does gender affect inheritance? Gender affecting inheritance doesn't really matter for the mutant CFTR gene. There isn't much reasoning behind why there is a gender that are more prone to inheriting cystic fibrosis, but the gender is males. Even though males do inherit these genes more than women do, there was a study in 2014 that showed the lifespan of men versus the lifespan of women who were infected with cystic fibrosis. In the study, we could see that living men were about 38 years old, and the living females were only reaching about 36 years old. So we found out after this study that these women weren't living as long as the men were because different bacteria and disadvantage with the pathogens involved with the disease were infecting the women more than they were with men. Advancements in biology. There are many biological advancements that have come from the knowledge that Gregor Mendel has provided for the world. To the right, we see a picture. This is Gregor Mendel. He was the man with the pea plants. And because of his pea plant test, we were finding out many different ways that diseases could be inherited due to genes present in parents. And we've also been allowed to genetically modify and create hybrids of plants and vegetables that we consume today. Because of Mendel, we have found ways to mass produce a bunch of these vegetables and other foods that we use to eat. Overall, Mendel has furthered our agricultural success and has given us many ideas in healthcare.